The man drifted at sea for several days and finally saw the Statue of Liberty. But as soon as he arrived in America, he was tagged along with other Jews and received a lecture in the customs hall, with everyone's face filled with melancholy. He immediately felt that this was no different from being in a concentration camp, but he quickly corrected himself, reminding himself that this was America, the land everyone yearned for. After receiving aid, the first thing the man did was to find an American lady to experience the joy of being on top of the world. However, having been in the concentration camp for so long, he found himself somewhat lacking in that aspect. The man could only end it quickly. The man's name was Laszlo, a Hungarian architect. After the outbreak of World War II, he and his wife were captured and sent to a concentration camp because of their Jewish identity. They barely escaped with their lives and eventually made their way to America. Being new and unfamiliar with the place, he had no choice but to seek refuge with his cousin Molnar in Philadelphia. Molnar ran a small renovation company locally and generously offered Laszlo a small storage room and a job at the company. Laszlo was quite satisfied with this, but he soon discovered that Molnar had completely changed as a person. He had changed his name, married a Catholic wife, and converted to Catholicism himself. His speech and actions exuded a sense of shrewdness and slickness. And what about Molnar? Regardless of the situation, Laszlo could only go to the relief station for food. Despite his circumstances, he still had an artist's inherent pride, because when he was in Hungary, he had designed many internationally renowned buildings, which remained standing even after the baptism of gunfire. Soon, he got an opportunity. Harry, the son of a wealthy man, approached Molnar, hoping he could renovate a nearby study, claiming that money was not an issue, but it had to be surprising. After an on-site inspection, Laszlo immediately came up with a design plan and raised the price to $2,000. Under his supervision, the study's renovation went smoothly. He designed integrated sliding cabinet doors for the new bookshelves, which not only prevented direct sunlight from hitting the books, but also allowed for the removal of heavy curtains, making the room brighter. The symmetry is in a natural wood color, and when the cabinet doors are opened, there is a graceful aesthetic. After the renovation, the entire study was completely transformed. The previous dullness and old-fashioned look were gone, replaced by the artistic beauty of minimalism and modernism. Laszlo was very satisfied with this, and hoped that this design would help him make a name for himself in the United States. But just then, Harry's father, Van Buren, returned early and saw the completely altered study. He flew into a rage. As a nouveau riche, he couldn't appreciate this avant-garde design at all. Faced with Van Buren's unreasonable behavior, Laszlo remained composed and dignified. He didn't believe there was anything wrong with his design, but that night, he was woken up by Molnar from his sleep because he hadn't satisfied the father. Harry refused to pay the renovation costs. Molnar blamed the entire loss of this business deal on Laszlo and immediately turned hostile, telling him to get out. Laszlo was hit hard and felt extremely frustrated. He never expected his cousin to be so shameless, nor did he expect that in America, this so-called paradise, contracts could be torn up at will, and payments could be made arbitrarily. Is it all about being rough and uncivilized? Is this the truth that this land believes in? Laszlo was greatly affected, and with nowhere else to go, he could only stay in a refugee shelter and make a living by mining coal. He drifted through each day in a daze and even became addicted to drugs. It was at this time that the wealthy Van Buren suddenly came to find him. He had completely changed from his previous arrogance and rudeness, showing great respect to Laszlo and even inviting him for coffee. The reason for this change was that a magazine had published a column article praising Van Buren's newly renovated study, commending his artistic taste. Van Buren was very pleased, as nouveau riche individuals often enjoy being praised for having taste and culture. He didn't truly appreciate Laszlo's design, he simply saw him as a useful person. Van Buren found out through research that Laszlo was very famous in Europe and a highly talented architect. So, he used the typical tactics of a capitalist, praising, apologizing, and returning the previously withheld payment, finally extending an olive branch. Laszlo was invited to attend high society dinners, and a lawyer for a US vice president immediately stated that he could help rescue Laszlo's wife and children, only needing the relevant identification documents. Before deciding to reuse Laszlo, Van Buren asked him one question. "Why did you choose architecture?" Laszlo replied, "The way of all things is self-evident. Is there anything that can better explain the existence of a cube's definition than the structure of the cube itself? Many wars broke out. Yet my buildings were preserved intact, standing firm in the city. I can foresee the myriad expressions of human anger and fear. This ridiculous torrent may continue to surge and swell, but my buildings will stand firm amidst the turmoil, resisting the erosion by the banks of the Danube." When Laszlo said this, his face was full of pride and confidence. This stirred a pang of bitterness in Van Buren's heart. He simply couldn't stand his elite demeanor, and thus the seeds of extreme hatred were sown. After the dinner party, Van Buren took everyone to a hillside, where he planned to build a community building, a comprehensive structure integrating a church, library, auditorium, and gymnasium. He intended to invite Laszlo to be the chief designer of this project. Laszlo's grandiose words stirred his emotions. and the American dream that had been fading in his heart became clear once again. He knew the difficulty of this project was unprecedented, but he still gladly accepted because it was a rare opportunity for him to prove himself. Laszlo moved into Van Buren's estate and began drafting the design plans. Harry told him that budget was not an issue, and he should feel free to unleash his talent. Laszlo was relieved, knowing that designing such a complex building to perfect standards would inevitably cost a fortune. After some initial measurements, Laszlo quickly drew up the plans and created a three-dimensional model. Its design was complex yet exquisite, grand yet simple, combining functionalism and minimalism, highlighting the authenticity and strength of the building materials without any excessive decorative elements. It used reinforced concrete to emphasize the simplicity of the materials and the equality of ideas, belonging to the early modernist school of architecture. Particularly ingenious was its cross-projection design. As the sun rose and set, the light passed through the wooden crossbeams at the base of the tower, casting a projection onto the altar painting in the church hall. It would form a golden cross pattern. Everyone imagined that wonderful and sacred scene, thinking it was simply a stroke of genius. However, the project's progress was not as easy as imagined. Van Buren verbally expressed unconditional trust in Laszlo, but secretly hired other contractors for budget control. He outwardly praised Laswell's design, but covertly undermined it at every turn. The veterinarian's son, Harry, brought in other designers to demand cost control. Cut expenses, reduce unnecessary details. Because this is a government investment project with a limited budget, cutting corners and the money saved is their profit. Soon, Laszlo discovered that the design drawings had been altered.
Behind their back! You have that meeting with another god, that designer.
Who the hell is James T. Simpson? Who is he you want to try to get me? Laszlo, who had a passionate pursuit of architectural art, could not tolerate the design being altered. He flew into a rage and even got into a fight with another designer. Seeing Laszlo lose his temper, Van Buren stepped in to persuade him with kind words. Oh, but this is just his pretense. In the end, he still says one thing and does another, acting like a cunning old fox. Laszlo had no choice. To ensure the project could proceed according to his design, he had to sacrifice his own compensation to cover the shortfall in project funds, which was exactly what Van Golen wanted to see. After all, what capitalist doesn't want something for nothing? Well, sometime later, under the lawyer's arrangements, Laszlo's wife, Ertz, and niece, Sophia, escaped from the concentration camp to the United States. But what pained Laszlo deeply was that due to prolonged malnutrition, his wife developed severe osteoporosis and could only sit in a wheelchair. She also had a serious leg condition, often suffering from excruciating pain. Laszlo couldn't imagine how much his wife had suffered and endured in the concentration camp. His heart ached as if being cut by a knife, and tears welled up in his eyes. Upon hearing that Laszlo's wife had arrived in the United States, Van Buren took the initiative to invite them to dinner. During the meal, he displayed a sense of superiority, as if he were giving alms to beggars. However, Erzsébet mentioned that she had studied English at Oxford University and worked for a well-known newspaper in Hungary. Van Buren's jealousy instantly peaked. He himself had not received much education, and his wife had passed away early. He simply couldn't tolerate his servant Laszlo, having such an eloquent and well-educated wife. She immediately began to mock. "Can you help your husband change his accent, so he doesn't sound like a shoe shiner when he speaks English?" After saying this, she tossed a coin over. Faced with such humiliation, Laszlo could only endure it now. As the person sitting across from him was his benefactor, to achieve his architectural dreams, he was willing to pay any price. Laszlo silently bent down to pick up the coin. The others at the dining table were already accustomed to this scene. Ever since Ertzi arrived, such humiliation had never ceased. Van Buren's son, after getting drunk, even made lewd comments towards Sophia.
I didn't say I'd like to slip my prick into her.
Laszlo had no choice but to endure. He could only comfort himself by thinking that no matter what, this place was much better than a concentration camp. With family reunited and his career starting, everything was full of hope. But just as Laszlo was envisioning the completion of the project and making a name for himself in America, a serious accident occurred at the Three Wheels Transport Company. 2 people were seriously injured, and he immediately decided to halt the work. Laszlo was furious. He had staked everything on the project, and now it was casually stopped, extinguishing the hope that had been ignited. Erz saw this clearly, and advised, "You know what those rich people are like." To him, this was just like renovating a kitchen. Laszlo's American dream was completely extinguished. He no longer fantasized about getting rich here, and instead found a job as a drug manufacturer, starting a life of calm and stability. One day, his niece Sophia suddenly announced that they were moving to Jerusalem, Israel. Although America is more developed and free, they never felt a sense of belonging. Even if life in Jerusalem would be more difficult, they were determined to go. She also urged Laszlo to join them, but at that moment, Laszlo announced that he wanted to go back and continue completing that project. because Van Buren sent someone to invite him again. Ertz advised, "I don't like that person. He acknowledges you as quickly as he abandons you. He treats this project as casually as a kitchen renovation." But Laszlo didn't want to give up on this magnificent neo-Gothic building, which was the embodiment of his hard work and the foundation for realizing his personal ideals. Ignoring the advice, he flew to Italy, where Van Buren was selecting materials needed for the church. Laszlo introduced the supplier, Ola, to Van Buren, and Ola took them to the source of the materials. The marble here was as white as paper and incredibly beautiful. After purchasing the materials, Laszlo attended an underground party and was captivated by a blonde woman amidst the classical music, completely unaware. Van Buren was watching him for a while as he danced, and then Laszlo headed deeper into the tunnel, with Van Buren immediately following. In a dark tunnel, Van Buren saw Laszlo looking utterly disheveled, a far cry from his previous elite appearance. Feeling a surge of superiority, Van Buren launched into a tirade of insults against Laszlo. "Who do you think you are? Do you think you're special? That you can be above everyone else? Just because you're educated? You're nothing but a vagrant. You'll never see the light of day." That night, Laszlo suffered the embodiment of upper-class cruelty and abuse. Like a walking corpse, he returned to America. And with a lingering passion for architectural art, he suppressed his inner grief and humiliation, methodically advancing the project's progress. Since then, he seemed like a changed person. His former humility and caution were gone, and he became rough and arrogant, increasingly resembling Van Buren. When a worker was fooling around during a break, he cursed him out and even fired the young man on the spot.
Do you want to kill them all? Your little boat has put everyone in danger, do you hear me?
Seeing this, Els said painfully, "Being with you makes me feel uncomfortable. I've watched you turn into a selfish old man." Els was full of grievances. He stayed in America for Laszlo's ideals. Had he known it would turn out like this, he might as well have gone to Jerusalem. Because it's fun, that's the only option. Laszlo told him about what his cousin Molnar did when he first came to America. He had no choice, because even his relatives were assimilated by this land and became selfish. People here don't want them to stay.
We are nobody. Yeah, first.
Laszlo finally realized that they do not belong to this land. This is a playground for capital and the powerful, where only people like Van Buren can thrive. This is a graveyard for idealism, a paradise for the shameless. Els was shaken. He did not expect that his husband had gone through so many terrible things after coming to America. He raised his head and said, "My poor husband, what exactly have they taken from you?" That night, Laszlo confessed to his wife about the humiliating experience he had that evening. Els finally understood why her husband had changed so much. It wasn't her fault. The blame lay with this filthy land and those despicable so-called high society people. She comforted him, saying there's no need to feel ashamed. The harm we suffer only affects our bodies. Our spirit is forever noble and can never be tainted. You're right, this place is beyond saving. This land, the food here, this country, all are beyond saving. Let's go to Israel, be with Sophia and the others, but before leaving, Els must do one thing. He pushed the mobility aid to Van Buren's estate and exposed his misdeeds in front of all his family and friends.
Whatever this is supposed to be, I don't like it. I am calling your husband to come and fetch you.
Your father is an evil rapist.
Daddy, what is she talking about?
Look at him. He cannot say anything.
Van Buren was thunderstruck. He never imagined that someone as lowly as a servant would have the audacity to expose him publicly. Harry was the first to lose his composure, bursting out in curses.
Tell him what you did to my husband.
Van Buren feigned calmness and said inwardly, "I only had good intentions towards him. He is an old dog in the throes of illness, and when a dog is sick, it always bites the hand first." Clearly his defense was weak and ineffective. Everyone present knew his character. For a Catholic, such an accusation was harder to accept than death by 1,000 cuts. Completely breaking down, they had Els dragged out. Soon after, Van Buren disappeared. Everyone searched everywhere and eventually found some clues inside the building that was about to be completed. But the truth of everything became irrelevant with the completion of this magnificent building. Many years later, Laszlo became a world-renowned architect. In an architectural exhibition held in Venice, he appeared with his daughter Sophia. At this time, his wife Els had already passed away. He was also in a wheelchair and had lost his ability to speak. Sophia spoke on his behalf with the following speech. In her memoir, she described her design as a machine without any superfluous parts. That is the best design and also her highest level. This type of architecture has a solid core, a kind of rugged beauty. This is a way to bring the perceptions of the local residents into the world exactly as they are. The mountains and rocks define them. They symbolize nothing, convey no message, they simply exist, and this is the essence of primitive architecture. Her first work in the United States was the Van Buren Institute in the suburbs of Philadelphia. This building references her time in the concentration camp and reflects her deep longing for her late wife. In this design, she reconstructed the cells inside the concentration camp, completely replicating the dimensions of the prison she was in at the time. When visitors look up, the glass roof 20 meters above is particularly striking. This glass, which lets in the daylight, can evoke thoughts of freedom and individual consciousness. She also recreated the concentration camp where she and her wife stayed, connecting it with secret corridors. This unique design transcends space and time. When the speech was over, thunder roared, used his unique architectural design philosophy to rewrite his painful concentration camp experience. It allows people, when immersed in the architecture, to feel the deep sense of confinement and despair, while also seeing the eternal light and hope through the glass above. This kind of design is imprinted with her personal experiences, making it a vibrant piece of architectural art and a truly powerful example of the Shonai style. The Shonai style is featured in the film directed by Brady Corbett, released in 2024. The film won 10 awards at the 97th Oscars, including Best Actor, Best Cinematography, and Best Director, as well as the Golden Globe for Best Picture, Best Director, and the BAFTA for Best Director and Best Actor. In 2024, this film can be said to have swept the awards. Adrian Brody's melancholic aura, both inside and out, perfectly matched the characteristics of the film's protagonist, an idealist with the American dream, who, in the process of pursuing his dream, faced malice from the upper class, was abandoned by family, mocked by wealthy businessmen, and exploited by capital. This is the legendary and tumultuous life of the avant-garde architect Laszlo, and also the unspeakable pain of a generation of dream chasers. Laszlo escaped from a concentration camp and then plunged into the bubble of the American dream. His fear of humanity made him focus more on raw expression. Crossing, by transcending time and space, we can get a glimpse of the truth hidden in history. Lie, human society has always been a primitive society. Civilization is merely a sugarcoating over the essence of the wild. The weak being preyed upon by the strong has always been the truth of survival, unrelated to morality or faith. But it is precisely because of these barbaric existences that the fleeting brilliance of humanity appears even more precious. Or perhaps the director wants to use this film to remind us that the true courage of civilization lies in preserving those raw truths of survival. Once we beautify these barbaric elements, even the freest places can become concentration camps. The tombstones that humanity carves for violence and barbarism are also secret passageways to redemption. Right, that's it for today's commentary. NJ, enjoy it, remember to follow, like, and comment. That's it. See you next time.